Good afternoon, and welcome to a new webinar from Tricise. Today I'll be talking about a new service that we created, and we've named that service Application Managed Service. So before we get started, let me quickly introduce myself. My name is Christian Rikas. I started 25 years ago as a consultant at the company that made Automic, and back then it was still called UC4. You may have heard of UC4. And after 19 years, Broadcom put an end to that chapter. And after a short break of 4.5 years, I found my way to Tricise. Okay, so without any further ado, let's have a look at the details. Before I proceed, I muted the chat and your microphone or the possibility to speak, and I will turn that on as soon as I've finished my presentation. Okay, I'll share my screen and see what we have. You might have seen this slide. It shows the service portfolio that Tricise offers. And we have several clusters of service products. And the one that we will investigate today is the so-called Application Managed Service, which also has 3 clusters. And these are administration services, operating and monitoring services, and design services. So we will cover the details, what is part of these services, and find out what they will provide. Before I start with those details about the services, I want to give a brief introduction to the topic itself. So why does Tricise offer this application managed service? The main reason is the pressure to automate processes is it's all over the industry. So each and every company needs to automate their processes. And to tackle this challenge in IT, we need robust and reliable and highly available IT systems. But the problem is that we need qualified personnel for that. And here we saw, at least in the last couple of years, that this gets harder and harder for the companies to find. So to find qualified personnel that is able to run an Automic system or to monitor jobs, for example. So we have this shortage of skilled labor, and that is precisely the problem that will be much more in the future. And that's where Tricise Application Managed Services comes into play. So this webinar describes our service, and yeah, let's have a look at that. What is actually the challenge for the companies? One of the main challenges is if the only, let's call him full-time administrator, leaves the company, for example, because he's retired, then this often leaves a gap, a knowledge gap that someone has to fill. And the remaining employees do often not have that capacity to fully fill these gaps. And that is creating the risk of neglected Automic systems. And I've seen such systems where the main administrator left the company and his surrogate or proxy had a knowledge of the administration, but not the full knowledge. And this is exactly the situation that we can cover with Automic, with the application managed service. So our solution is this. Tricise takes care of the Automic system, and our employees monitor the availability, and we restore the system if necessary. And One thing, not the main thing, but one thing is we install or remove agents as needed or update them in case of a security vulnerability. And as another example, we create or modify administrative objects. So we fill that gap that the administrator that leaves the company leaves behind. So we fill that gap. Then another challenge is due to the demographic developments in not just in Europe, in Germany, where I am located, but actually in whole Europe, it is becoming increasingly difficult to find suitable employees for administration and operational tasks. And as a result, new automation requirements may not be implemented by the main staff, and existing solutions may not be further developed. And operational tasks, such as process monitoring, may only be inadequately performed. And I've seen that at customer side. So they run workflows for 10 years, for 20 years, and there is not a single point where they do modify those workflows. Sometimes the workflows run jobs that are not even needed anymore. But nobody knows what happens if they delete those jobs. And this is, from my perspective, a consequence of we don't have enough personnel that can manage those situations. So never touch a running system, keep it running. But we know that jobs that run, even though they are not needed, they create a load, and they create, at the end of the day, they create costs. And especially with the new pricing model that Broadcom offers. So what's the solution for that? Tricise provides you with qualified personnel, employees to support your operational processes. And this allows you your internal staff to focus on more on their core tasks or drive the further development of their processes automation. And process monitoring no longer needs to be handled by your employees. And this is, in most of the cases, it's a relief for them that they don't have to monitor the jobs, for example, in the nighttime. And that's one of the challenges that we also have. So monitoring activities 24/7. If it's done by in-house staff and on-site, that can place a significant financial burden on the company. So it's expensive to pay them 24/7. Additionally, the personnel strain on employees due to the night shifts and weekend duties can be considerable, often making it difficult to recruit new employees. And I can easily imagine that. So if someone is looking for a new job and the advertising says you need to fulfill night shifts and at the weekend, that's not quite sexy. So that could be a good point to try a different solution. And that solution could be, if Tricise takes over the 24/7 monitoring of the Automic systems and processes. So we leverage partners in different time zones, reducing your costs and minimize the strain on your internal employees caused by the night shifts. Meaning, if there is a 24/7 monitoring required for jobs, so somebody needs to sit in front of the screen and react if jobs fail, we use partners for that, so that work in different time zones. Then we have the challenge of the efficiency. If someone that has to modify objects and he doesn't do that on a regular basis, so performs rarely, they often need to familiarize themselves with the topic. And this is time consuming, and we lose time, and that frequently results in non-compliance with the best practice. So find a quick solution. We don't have time. Okay, I don't mind if the agent is hard-coded in the job. Okay, come on, we need to get done. So this is something that is non-compliant with the best practice. And this also applies to the administrative aspects of an Automic system, especially in smaller systems with fewer users or agents. Example, if there is a new user to be implemented, well, the customer might have user groups and he assigns that new user to that user group because it's done quickly. But do the rights and privileges really fit to that user? Does he get too many privileges and too many rights? Maybe. And that's what's meant with efficiency. So, of course, somebody could adjust that authorization system for the user, but it takes time to figure out how that really works because he did it 1 year ago or half a year ago, and such an administrator will most likely consult the documentation because he doesn't remember how that worked. So what's our solution? For our AMS team, working with the atomic objects and performing changes is part of daily operations. And our team relieves your employees from time-consuming research and documentation and complex implementation efforts. We implement changes either according to the internal company guidelines or based on recognized best practices. And let's take a job, for example. If the internal style guide says hard code the agent, okay, we'll do that. If there is no style guide, then we will implement an agent maybe by using curly braces and put the agent name into a variable object. And you may know that if such a job is to be transported from one client to another, if you use curly braces or use script, then we don't need to change the agent name when we transport from one system to another. So, and our guys don't need to read documentations, how that works. They already know that. So they're much more efficient than someone that does that half a year or once per year. Okay, so now we've got the clusters, and this is our service portfolio for AMS, and we'll have a look at the administration services. So what do we actually offer there? In the first place, monitoring of alarm notifications from Automic server processes. Normally, server processes are monitored automatically by either by the customer, he may have a tool for that, but often that's not the case, and then we deliver our tools that search through the log files of the server processes for any alarm notifications. So if there is a trace that has been created, we'll find out. If there are certain error messages in the log files, we'll find out. And if there are alarm notifications that are being generated, we'll respond by investigating the cause and attempting to resolve the issue. So something that actually every Automic administrator has to do. Monitoring of database performance. This is always a topic in the automation server log files. So we monitor the Automic server log files for so-called time-critical DB calls and potential connection losses. We attempt to identify the causes and initiate countermeasures. So if you deal with Automic and especially with the server log files, you may have heard of those time-critical DB calls. And since version 24, Automic implemented such a connection test already, which runs hourly. But of course, there can be time-critical DB calls anytime in such a system. The reason for those calls may be non-critical, but if they happen several 20, 30, 50 times per day, then they should be investigated. And I've seen systems that have a lot of time-critical DB calls where I would say, we need to find out what the reason is. And the customer says, yeah, we would like to find out, but we don't have the capabilities and the time to do that. And as long as nobody complains, we'll keep it as it is. Maybe not the best idea. Troubleshooting agent-related issues. If there are agent-specific issues, such as sporadic connection losses or job failures, we enable the traces for further investigation to narrow down those issues. And we take care of resolving the issues. So it could be a network problem that happens from time to time. Well, let's find out why do we have so many network interruptions? Yeah. Installation, configuration, and decommissioning of agents. We install and configure agents, excluding hosts, and the service manager, if the customer wishes to have the service manager installed. Why do we do that? So our findings is that if the administrator does the installation of an agent, let's say 1 or 2 per year, he will call a consultant at least to ask him, what do I have to do? Can you quickly guide me to that installation? And it's always a hassle for an administrator that doesn't install agents on a regular basis. And with the service, he doesn't have to take care about that. So he just orders, I don't know, RA FTP agent on a certain machine. And when our AMS teams have access to that machine, they will simply install that. And of course, we assign the agents to the clients according to the customer requirements. And if the agent is to be decommissioned, we uninstall them and delete the agent objects in Automic. And of course, we check if the agents are somewhere used in some of the jobs or scriptings or file events. We'll check that beforehand. Patch management for agents. If bugs acutely restrict processing functionality or security vulnerabilities threaten the system, we take care of the patch management and updating the agents. To do this, we communicate with job owners to schedule an update window. Sounds simple, but can be quite complicated because there might not be a time window when not a single job is executed. So it always, at least from my perspective, it needs the whole team to communicate and find out where do we have a slot where not hundreds or thousands of agents need to be run in the next hour. Okay. Collaboration with Broadcom on Automic related issues. If a bug occurs that affects the customer's environment, we work with Broadcom to provide a workaround or a fix. Well, if the customer gets the license from Tricise, he also gets the support. So our AMS team will pass that problem to our Tricise support, and if they can fix the problem or decide, well, this seems to be a bug, they pass it to Broadcom, and what they do is they keep on asking, do you have a fix? How does the workaround look like? When will you send us the fix? So they keep the pressure on Broadcom, so to say, and it's not the customer that does or that needs to do that. And in the daily business, it's sometimes or mostly a tough job to keep that pressure on the vendor, and that's what we do. That's where we step in. Support and management of scheduled maintenance tasks. If the entire Automic system is scheduled to be updated, we schedule the downtime. We plan the downtime. So normally, a consultant will do that update, and we communicate with the consultant and, of course, with the team. So we are, so to say, an interface between the guy that updates the system and the team members that need to know that the system will be stopped on that hour of the day. So we communicate that date and time and ensure that clients and schedule objects are stopped. And of course, after the update, they will be started again. And we check if everything went well. Maintenance of the Automic database schema is also a topic, if not already in place, we have to say. So most of the times, database reorganization is in place, but I have seen customers that run Automic for 1.5 years without any database reorganization. So if it's not already in place, we implement that and schedule the database reorganization with the Automic utilities. And the cleanup criteria are defined together with the customer. And if we have an existing environment, we will check that criteria. So my finding is that sometimes customers don't really know what these values mean. So they keep, just to say a number, 100 executions and throw off the database everything that's older than 5 years. Well, that could cause a very big database if the customer runs a lot of jobs. And sometimes when I ask them, why do you keep that many years or that many settings, data sets in the database? The answer is, we don't know. So we only need 5 months or 6 months in the database. Well, we keep 3 years. Okay, we don't know why we do that. So that's also something that we try to find out if the settings that are already set or in use, if they are necessary, if they make sense or not. And we regularly check whether the database reorganization is carried out correctly for all clients. Correctly and for all clients, and if does it run anyway? Well, I've seen the database reorganization workflow to be scheduled in a schedule object, but it was set to inactive. So the workflow ran every weekend, or I think it was Saturday at 10 o'clock in the evening. But the workflow itself and the jobs were set to inactive. Okay, so we'll check that as well. Management of database access. It's not the biggest thing, but it's a tiny service that we also deliver. If access to the Automic database is required using the VARA SQL, which in turn requires an agent, with a connection object, or from v24.3, that's also possible with the VARA SQLi. We manage database users who can access the database in read-only mode. and we provide the necessary connection objects. So meaning we ask the DB admins for a user that has only read access, and we ask, of course, for the password, and we enter those information to the connection object, and we provide that connection object so that users can use the Vara SQL or Vara SQLi. So that feature was implemented in 24.3, where the Vara SQLi can also be maintained with a connection object. And that's what we do. So we provide those connection objects to ensure that the Vara SQLi cannot destroy the database. Reorganization of the analytics database if analytics is in use. If it's not already in place, we implement and schedule the reorganization of the analytics database. Broadcom, you may know that Broadcom provides an action pack for that, but it has to be implemented. It's not done in 5 minutes, so it takes a little bit longer, and we do that implementation. And of course, we monitor the implementation, or let's better say the executions of that workflow. Then creation and modification of objects in client 0. So if need be, we modify and create objects in client 0. And for example, existing objects such as using system settings, maybe we need to lower the SQL security level from 3 to 2 or to 1, we'll do that. And the same goes for include objects or calendar objects, maybe sync objects that are used in client 0, variable objects that can be used from other clients as well. We implement that, and yeah, so that's one of the administration services. Creation, duplication, and deletion of clients. I would say that all of the administrators know how to create a new client, but I would say that not all of them know how to delete or duplicate existing clients. So, and that's what we provide here. We create new clients as needed, duplicate existing clients, or delete them. Not a big deal, but if that's not the daily business of an administrator, and that will not be the daily business of every administrator, maybe we're a little bit quicker, and the administrator does not have to take care about that. So the AMS team does it. And that, of course, includes, for example, if required, to clone one client from, for example, a development system to a test system, and from there to a prod system. Preparation of new clients. If we create a new client, we also prepare that new client, and that, for example, is creation of a time zone, or at least assigning a time zone. If it's already available in client 0, we assign a time zone. We just use these client settings, and if necessary, create folder structures, and of course, users and user groups. So the summary, I don't go through all of these, but this is the summary of the content of the administration services. That's what we provide. The next cluster is operating and monitoring services. And this is the big deal. This is what makes it interesting for the customers. So monitoring of errors and alerts, execution of defined recovery actions. So we do that what the classical typical operator does. So we we restart and cancel and unblock and deactivate and skip and so on the jobs or the workflows. And we do that according to the defined instructions that we have available in the so-called standard operating process. And yeah, so that's important for us to have it. And if necessary, we coordinate those actions with the relevant departments. And by the way, SOP is the abbreviation for standard operating procedure. So that's on my next slide. So, and that's what we also do. Okay. A mouse click moves to the next slide. Sorry. Processing of ad hoc requests. So if job owners request the ad hoc execution of jobs, we handle the start according to the standard operating procedure. And this is something that's quite typical for a lot of customers that I know. Business users call the Automic team. In the worst case, they call them, hey, can you run that job with the parameter ABC? And then somebody says, okay, I'll do that, run the job, answer the prompt set, click OK, and then go. And that's what we do. That's what we offer with this service. So, and additionally, we modify settings in schedule and workflow objects upon request. And you may know that you have a schedule and somebody calls you and says, the job ABC, can you set it to inactive for the next, I don't know, 2 weeks? Okay, open the monitor, uncheck the active flag, and then store that. So that's what we also do. Monitoring and escalation of issues related to the Automic server and agents. If we have an outage of the Automic server machine is not available, or the agent machines are not available, which is an issue for the processing, we inform the job and the business owners. We tell them, hey, your job is to be started, is due to be started, but the Automic server is not available. This is a little bit similar to the administration service that we provide, but we provide it here as well, because if the customer does not order the administration service, then nobody else would inform the business users. And that's the reason why we implemented that here in the operating and monitoring services as well. And we want to inform the business users that their jobs will have a delayed start. Support during Automic-related maintenance work. If the Automic system needs to be shut down for maintenance, we stop queues and clients. Well, who else should do that? So if the AMS team is responsible for running jobs and monitoring jobs, they of course stop the queues and the clients. So that if, let's say, an external consultant shuts down the system, everything is prepared. So queues are stopped, clients are stopped, and then the external can proceed with the shutdown and the update of the system. And if the system is up and running again, typically schedule objects have executions that are timed out. And you may know that the only way to find out if something has not been started because the server machine was down, it's the schedule monitor. And you need to right mouse click and restart that or rerun that object, because Automic will not do that automatically. And that's what we also provide. So our team checks the schedule objects, and tries to finds out which objects should actually be executed, and they do that if that's written to the SOP. Escalation to the next support level and coordination for problem resolution. So if an issue such as a failure of servers or agent machines cannot be resolved by us, we escalate it to the customer's next support level. We coordinate all necessary steps to resolve the problem. So if the Automic server is down or an agent machine is down, we sometimes may not be able to fix that problem. So imagine a host agent. The AMS team will most probably not get access to a host machine and restart that agent there. So we need to have a contact that we can pass that problem to, and that's what we do. So we contact the next support level to inform the guys that, for example, an agent has to be restarted. Summary. And then finally, we have the design services. So that's our last cluster of services that we provide. Design and management of objects. And that's what it says. So we create new objects and modify existing ones upon request. If internal style guides exist, we adhere to them, and objects are stored in specific folder if required by the Automic permission system. Additionally, we delete objects upon request. So if the customer has a small team and they don't have the broadest knowledge of Automic, then this comes into play. They know what scripts are to be executed. So they have a program that has to be run on a certain machine, and they can request a job. And so the AMS team will create that job. The job has to be executed on Windows, Unix, I don't know, machine. And the program that has to be called is AVC. We create that. And if there is a bunch of jobs, we put them into a workflow. So we do everything that a normal user would do as well. And we create the objects. This is also, it looks like a slide, like a tiny topic, but it actually is a big topic. Updating of standard operating procedures. I know that those standard operating procedures in a lot of companies exist only in the mind of the people working with Automic. So they know what to do. They know their jobs. They know what to do, cancel, block, restart, whatever. So if these SOPs, in the best case, they are written somewhere. The worst case is they are not written and they're just in the head of the employees. But if they are written to, let's say, Excel file or Word document, of course, they need to be updated. And it's an old and timeout documentation is worth nothing. So we support the customer in updating the standard operating procedures used for the operational management of Automic. And that ensures that actually everybody that has knowledge of Automic, the software Automic, can use those SOPs to run such a system. And in my opinion, this is very important for customers to have. A standard operating procedure that is up to date. Okay. Creation of reports and execution statistics. This is sometimes requested by business users, and we provide that service, so to say. If business users request execution statistics for specific jobs or workflows, we provide them as a CSV or HTML file. And we do that, of course, using the reporting tool. We create the queries for that. And if the business user wishes to have that as an email attachment, he gets it as an email attachment. Additionally, we create dashboards that offer visual insights to executions. And of course, that requires that we have analytics installed. And then the last topic for the design services, support for design optimization and implementation of best practices. So we support the customer in optimizing their Automic processes, and this can lead to more efficient jobs and workflow designs, or the use of previously unused features that enable specific processing. And I've seen that really quite often. So customers that use Automic for, I don't know, 10, 15, 20, 25 years, they stay with their old functionalities. They don't use filter output. They don't use if or for each workflows or a storage object. So those new or a web service job, they simply don't use it because they always duplicate their existing jobs, and that's fine as long as they don't or they are not a workaround. And so that's what we try to offer here. If there are new functionalities that would make the objects more robust and more prone or less prone to failures, why not implement that? And of course, this is always something that needs to be discussed with the customer. For example, a web service job, they don't run curl commands in your Unix job. Why not take that web service job, which makes your life much easier when it comes to processing a report, passing variables to the predecessor, and so on. Okay, summary. So let's have a look. How do we proceed? How is it going further? Tricise determines the customer's service requirements together with them. In the process, we clarify details such as, are all services needed? Or only specific parts of the service? At what times should the service be provided? Because, of course, it makes a difference if it is a 24/7 job sitting in front of the screen, waiting for jobs to be failed, or just in the business hours. Is the service delivery required within the European Union, or is it also possible from outside? And if it's required to be delivered in the European Union, that may raise the costs, of course. If it's also possible to do it from anywhere else in the world, that's interesting if it's in regards of the cost. Also, which SLA times should apply. And of course, it's more expensive if we have a reaction time of, let's say, 30 minutes and a solution time of 1 hour. That's more expensive than 2 hours and 4 hours solution time, because the shorter the time frame to react is, the more people need to be involved in that to answer or to react in time. And of course, we have other details that we clarify. How many systems do you have? What is the version number of the system? Do you have a V12 or V21 or 24? Or maybe a V10 version, which I would recommend to update. So things like this are also discussed and clarified. And then if the contract is signed, then the handover phase takes place. So during a defined time period, the Tricise MS team works closely with the customer to familiarize themselves with all the processes, procedures, and responsibilities. And of course, the duration depends, among other factors, on the number of selected services, Automic systems, that's what I said, clients, and object definitions. The availability and quality of the standard operating procedures are also relevant. And this really is a big topic. So if there are no SOPs, it's really tough, and we first need to have them. Okay, service onboarding. After a successful handover, the Tricise MS team begins its regular operations, and from this point on, the agreed service level agreements apply. And then, yeah, the AMS team does its job. So what sets us apart? We have the following ISO, that's ISO 9001 and ISO 27001. And Tricise has had a strong partnership with Bosch Global Software Technologies, GmbH, for over 15 years. And this partnership, combined with our own resources, allows us to establish a solid foundation for our AMS offering. And that's what it really is. So it's a solid foundation. And we work also in other areas with Bosch together. And yeah, that's a partnership that we fully trust. And where do we use Bosch, and where do we use European colleagues? Bosch comes into play if the service has to be delivered 24/7, and that's not the administrative service monitoring the log files. That's what we implement using script. So that's what we automate: 24/7 monitoring of failed jobs. We need to restart a job, cancel a job in the middle of the night. And that's where Bosch comes into play. So because they have a team that works in different time zones, and that's something that we currently cannot deliver with our European colleagues. Yeah. Okay, how do we proceed? Feel free to contact us. Dirk Zenhold is the Director of Automation Professional Services. So that's your first contact. And if you're interested and you need more details, and maybe it's you want to find out, is that something for you? How much does it cost? Then you will end up with me. So we will then meet and go through a list. How many systems, how many clients, things like that. So that I will check that so that we have all the details that we need. And then hopefully we'll meet again as a customer. Yeah. So my next slide and my last slide, time for questions. So I'll open up the chat, and it's called attendees may request to speak. So please do so. Okay, so I'll stop the screen share. Okay, so if you have any questions, feel free. And if you don't have any questions, maybe you just want to give feedback. If you find that information, that webinar useful, let me know. That would be great to know. Yeah. So I'm waiting for the chat messages arrives. Okay, it looks like no questions, no feedback. I would then say I'm done. I can nearly say in German Feierabend, or let's call it a day, 3 o'clock. Okay, there's one question. Will the application based on customer side or on your side? Well, what we do is or the customer needs to make sure that we can access his system. In the first place, it's the Automic web interface. And of course, if it's about to check the server log files, we need to have access to the server machine. So the customer needs to make sure that we have access to the machines. And that can be established using Citrix or in an REP session. So that's what we mainly do. Yeah, but that needs to be established. And the colleagues are, also my AMS team colleagues are not located at customer side. They will do that from their home office or from our office in Hungary, in Budapest. And if it's about the Bosch colleagues, of course, they are located somewhere in the world. So I hope that answers your question. Okay. You're welcome. So if you have no further questions, I would say let's end that session. I wanted to point out that we have webinars in a I think it's in a 3 months row that we have new fresh webinars where we deliver content that may be of interest for you and for the customers. So it would be great if you could, or if you would join us to the next webinar. Okay, so then have a nice day and see you soon. Bye.